This is critical thinking in the nervous system. So let's look at the questions. Here's the first one, the second one, and the third one. Now let's look at the first question, where it asks you to identify the false statement. In other words, all of the statements are true except one of them. So let's look at this first one, which says superficial reflexes involve higher centers while stretch reflexes involve only the spinal cord. Now, this is a true statement, and if you look at this slide that you have, you can see that superficial reflexes, which are the cremasteric or the abdominal reflexes, they enter the spinal cord, they go all the way to the higher centers, which means to the brain, and then come back and come to the spinal cord again, and then you have the efferent fibers coming out. So these were the afferent and these are the efferent fibers. In case of somatic reflexes or stretch reflexes, which are a kind of somatic reflex, the afferent fibers go in, they enter the spinal cord, and then the efferent fibers will come out and go this way. So this is efferent and this is afferent. So they are only at the spinal level. So that statement is a true statement. Now let's look at the next statement, which says that salivation and lacrimation are examples of autonomic reflexes. This is also true, as was this one. These are true statements, because anything where you have secretion from glands or you have contraction of smooth muscle, these smooth or cardiac muscle, these are autonomic reflexes. So salivation and lacrimation are glandular secretions from the salivary glands, and this one is from the lacrimal gland. Similarly, sweating from the sweat glands is again an example of autonomic reflexes. And muscular contraction would be, for example, dilation of the pupil or constriction of the pupil, or gastrointestinal activity. So those are again autonomic reflexes. So this is true. Now let's look at the third statement, which says damage to the ventral ramus will involve both afferent and efferent fibers. Now this again is true, because if you look at this picture here, and I have a part of the spinal cord, and here are the roots. So this is the dorsal root, this is the ventral root, this is the dorsal ramus, this is the ventral ramus. And let me just use different colors. So let me show afferent fibers. Afferent fibers from either part, say from the ventral ramus, will pass in to the spinal nerve, then they will go into the dorsal root. Here is the ganglion. Here's the cell body, the pseudo unipolar cell, and they will enter here. So similarly, from the dorsal ramus, they will come this way. They will have their cell body in the dorsal root ganglion and enter through the dorsal root. Now, if we look at the efferent fibers, so these are the motor fibers. They exit from this is the anterior horn. They exit from the anterior horn through the ventral root, enter the spinal nerve, then they enter the ventral ramus. You may have another efferent fiber coming out again from the ventral root and getting into the dorsal ramus. So now if you look at it, if yellow represents afferent fibers, so yellow is afferent and blue is efferent fibers, notice that the rami have both afferent and efferent fibers. So both dorsal ramus and ventral ramus will, just like the spinal nerve, the nerve is only this part, have afferent and efferent fibers. It's the roots which are divided. The dorsal root has afferent and the ventral root has efferent fibers. So to go back here, so we can see that damage to the ventral ramus will involve both afferent and efferent fibers. So this is also true. So these three were true. Let's look at the fourth one, which says decrease in the number of astrocytes in the central nervous system would interfere with myelination. Now this is a false statement, because it is a decrease in the number of oligodendrocytes. So it's oligodendrocytes in the central nervous system which would interfere with myelination. Astrocytes were to do with nutrition. Oligodendrocytes for myelination in the CNS, and Schwann cells in the peripheral nervous system. So this is the false statement. But let's look at the last statement, which says nociceptors are receptors that sense pain, and this is true. So this is also true. So hence this is the false statement. Now let's go to the next question. And this next question asks you to identify the true statement. And here we have the first one, which tells you the corneal reflex is an autonomic reflex. Now this is a false statement because the corneal reflex is one where you touch a wisp of cotton to the cornea and the person blinks. Now blinking is due to the orbicularis oculi muscle, which is a skeletal muscle. And remember, autonomic had to do with smooth muscle or glands. So corneal reflex is involves skeletal muscle, which means that it is a somatic reflex. So therefore this is false. The second statement, which says the salivary glands are stimulated by the sympathetic nervous system, this is also false because the salivary glands are stimulated by the parasympathetic nervous system, and it is the nerve fibers which follow the parasympathetic part which go with the 7th and the 9th cranial nerves, the facial and the glossopharyngeal. So this is also false. The third statement, which says bipolar cells are found in the dorsal root ganglion, again this is false because in the dorsal root ganglion you have what are called pseudo-unipolar neurons. Bipolar cells or bipolar neurons are found in the sense organs. For example, the taste buds. So you have taste buds. Then you have in the retina of the eye. Then you have in the spiral ganglion, which is to do with the hearing. So in the cochlea, the hearing, you have taste buds. You have bipolar cells there, and also in the olfactory epithelium. So wherever there is special sense organs, you have bipolar cells. So this is again, this statement is not true. And let's look at the last statement, which tells you that in the lacrimatory reflex, the 7th nerve forms the efferent pathway and the 5th nerve forms the afferent pathway. And here, if we look at this image, you can see that the afferent pathway is indeed carried by the 5th cranial nerve. So there is irritation of the surface of the eyeball here on the conjunctiva. The fibers go to the 5th nerve nucleus. From there, an interneuron connects it to the parasympathetic component of the 7th nerve. And then from there, the efferent fibers pass in the 7th nerve and they go to the gland. So you can see this is the lacrimal gland, and the 7th nerve stimulates the lacrimal gland and there is steering. So the afferent is by the 5th and the efferent is by the 7th, and you can see the direction of the arrows. So therefore, this statement is the true statement in this question. Now let's go to the next question, which says, in which of the following situations would the parasympathetic system not be involved? And let's look at the choices. Reflex salivation on exposure to the aroma of a sizzling steak. Remember, salivation, we did it earlier, is something to do with the parasympathetic in the component which goes with the 7th and the 9th nerves. These two nerves supply the salivary glands. So this does involve the parasympathetic system. So this will be part of the parasympathetic functions. The peristaltic movement of the GI tract, this also is a parasympathetic function because the parasympathetic nervous system stimulates the smooth muscle in the GI tract and causes peristalsis. So this is also a function. Pupillary constriction on exposure to bright light. The parasympathetic system does stimulate the constrictor pupillae, which is a smooth muscle, and when it stimulates that, there is pupillary constriction. So this is also a function of the parasympathetic nervous system. And let's look at the last one, which says increase in heart rate and respiratory rate on witnessing a gruesome accident. Now this is a sympathetic function. The sympathetic nervous system causes increase in heart rate and respiratory rate. The parasympathetic causes decrease in heart rate and decrease in respiratory rate. So the parasympathetic would not be involved in this situation. Hence, this would be the answer. So the answer to this question, we would choose this one.